you can always learn from that.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sticking my nose up to say, oh, these bigger businesses can't learn from smaller, because you absolutely can.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn industries, and we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is New Jersey's newest resident, Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say...
Not a resident. Resident of Florida.
That's true. I can't say that. That's right. He is a resident.
I'm a resident of Florida.
Florida.
But I will be going to
But
New
he
Jersey.
Moonlights in Jersey.
Yes,
that's right. There are tax consequences for what I just said. So my apologies to our Florida resident, Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say good afternoon, topic, speakers, topics, the whole bid, and our sponsors? Don't forget that. So take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, Dan Gordon, PCO Bookkeepers and M&A specialists. We do CFO work for the pest and lawn industry, as well as exit planning services. And let's see, sponsors. Got to read all this, right? If you're interested in marketing, Comarch by WorkWave, that would be comarch.com. They do digital and branding and things like that. And if you're interested in insurance, pest control specific insurance, PestSure, that's pestsure.com for auto, GL, and workers' comp, as well as EPLI and a few others. And if you're interested in joining a PMP Industry Insider peer group, please visit us at pmpindustryiinsider.com/peer groups, or go back and listen to episode 136 for more information. Or you could just continue on listening today, because we have the rock star facilitator of the PMP Industry Insider peer group groups.
Yes.
And that would be David Billingsly.
I now have a new description, Dan. It's rock star.
Yes. You're a rock star.
All right. I appreciate that. Yes. Correct. All right. I'm sorry. Keep going.
And for anybody who listened to the last episode, and I'm not sure which order they go into, Donnie called me the Florida Man. And anybody who wants to Google the Florida Man and come up with exactly what the Florida Man is, it's actually kind of comical. Probably.
I think he follows my cousin Skeeter for sure.
Yeah,
for those of you that know me, I'm from Florida, double wide trailer. I got a cousin named Skeeter. I'm certain that the Florida Man or Dan has contacted him about some of his doings.
It's probably rated RX, R plus, not quite X, but it's pretty funny.
It is.
Anyway, so let's give a quick background of Dave, this rock star, David.
Yes.
So David started his career in pest control and sales and service in the Washington, D.C. based American Pest. In 2006, worked his way up through the organization until 2016, when Anticimex purchased them. David held many roles in the as the platform president at American, and eventually became Western Region president for Anticimex until he left in 2021. He moved to Nevada. No tax reasons.
No taxes. And I am a Nevada resident.
He's a Nevada resident.
That's correct.
And he's an expert blackjack player.
That's right. So, and has an excellent poker face, might I add.
Yes, he has a good poker face. And so this episode is all going to be about card counting, but not really.
Correct.
Let's see. Did I? Welcome, David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Welcome, David. Glad to have you back. I am excited about this episode because I am interested to hear the nitty gritty of what's been going on in the peer groups and things that have been coming up. So welcome back. Great to have you. I wish, maybe it's probably a good thing that we did not record our pre-show banter that we had going on before that, but welcome back. Glad to have you.
I'm happy. I think this is this number 3 or 4 for me being back with you guys. So now
we got to count them up.
I'm feeling
your,
I'm like beginning. I'm almost at rock star status, right? Yeah. I almost feel like Billy Idol needs to come in. Have you seen the rock star commercials that are up, and Billy Idol comes in. He's not a rock star. I'm a rock star.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
That was like what's it?
It's like pay.com or one of the payroll companies. Dan, you would know this. This is right up your alley.
That's right.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Anyway, so I guess you're on the fourth time. I'm not sure whether that makes you the bottom of the best or the top of the mediocre.
It makes me something. I can tell you that. I'm definitely something.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway, let's get right into it.
Yes. Let's get into it. So David, you have been facilitating these peer groups. You've been meeting with a lot of companies. I want to start with, there's obviously, we're going to get into the benefits. If you're listening to this, you're not in one of the peer groups or you're not in a peer group period. By the end, we will give you plenty of good reasons to do so. But I'm interested to hear your perspective on what are some emerging issues that you're hearing? What are some things that you're seeing, some trends of that, a lot of our companies, I say but a lot of companies who are in these peer groups that are facing some interesting things that you found. Maybe just kind of a quick overview into that, and I'm sure that's probably going to lead into lots and lots of more discussion. So,
first off, describe how they work, and
So we can do that just so people know, and then we'll get into that.
So the peer groups, and you can go back to 136 around that, and then Dan and Donnie have had some other conversations about. But anyways, we've just got some groups together where usually 8 to 10-ish companies. We get together in person twice a year. And then also meet kind of off quarter for some check-ins. But listen, as the peer groups, we get together, we talk about how business is going, we share best practices. And, by having access to this, right, and facilitating these peer groups, much like my consulting business, it really gives me a good idea. Maybe not the pulse that Dan has, because he has like 8 billion clients, with
a B.
You got a billion clients, right? Yep. Dan's got all these clients, so he sees a lot of the data from the back end. The perspective I'm getting now is kind of on the front end, on the ground, working with these businesses and hearing how things are going. So, interesting trends, lots of feedback specifically around the economy. So we've had lots of conversations around the economy. How's the economy affecting, David, I'm in X city. Are you seeing the same economic factors affecting, businesses near me, or are we seeing this on a national level? And ultimately, I think what we see in our peer groups is I think business is continuing to thrive. I get on a lot of these, in addition to being a rock star, Dan, I'm also referred to as an expert. For those of you who can't see us, I'm doing the air quotes because I get a chuckle that the kid that grew up in a double wide trailer with a cousin named Skeeter is referred to as an expert. But I talk a lot with these PE firms and financially backed sponsors that are looking to potentially come into our space. And I get asked a lot, hey, what's going on in the industry? Why is this such an exciting industry? And I like to use the word tailwind. We have these tailwinds in our industry and these economic factors. So I think the industry is still extremely bright. But to the esteemed Mr. Gordon, are we still seeing that? I know you have your pest index. Are we still seeing that on the back end from the accounting side?
So remember, the pest index is non-door-to-door companies, and it's, I think, 130 or 140 companies. And we just released March, and that was 8%. That's the lowest it's been since we did it year over year, growing 8%, which any other industry would take that, right? But not us. And I wonder, is it the economy, or one of the things that we're seeing so much of that, and we're working with more and more door-to-door companies? Door-to-door probably makes up over 20% of the industry right now. So could that be having an effect on other companies by taking some of that business? Because I'm not seeing, the price increases that people are putting through. Nobody's losing business over that, but the growth is definitely slowing down. I don't know, Donnie, what do you think? You're in Raleigh. Raleigh is a huge door-to-door town.
Yeah, we get the micro. So Donnie, go to the micro level in the triangle market.
Well, for me, and by the way, I'm no Wall Street economist, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe there's probably a couple things happening here. Number one is that we keep hearing there's a recession coming, there's a recession coming, there's not a recession coming. I personally think we are not out of the I don't think we're out of the water yet, and I think it is having an impact, specifically in cities where there's a heavy tech sector. So, like in Raleigh, for example, there's a big tech sector here. There are layoffs that are happening. It hasn't been bad. It's been mainly of just companies kind of cleaning up their balance sheet and realizing they have to, make money. So I don't. I think there is a slowdown in demand, and the reason I say this is that this is backed up with web data. So if you look at like marketing, and you look at what's happening with searches on Google, you look at demand. Demand has picked up a little bit this year, but overall, like I don't want to compare it to 2020 because that was kind of an outlier. But in general, last year we could not spend our budget because demand was down. And is demand down because of what Dan talked about, which is it because people are circumventing the demand before it actually comes online? I don't know that for certain, but I do believe that there is an economic impact. Is it massive? No. And I think that combined, I do believe that companies in general, especially in larger markets where there is a door-to-door presence, you can't sit there and say, especially a market like Raleigh, where I bet you we've got 15, maybe 20 door-to-door companies, and they're all out banging doors. I mean, that absolutely has an impact on demand. So yes, I think inflation along with the economy is having an impact, and I do think that in addition to that, the door-to-door companies are putting a lot of pressure on in certain markets as well. And so,
but that's good for them, right? So
it is good for them. I mean, in the end, it expands the market really, because there's a lot of people who are never in the market that are now in the market because of door to door. And hey, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, that sounds crazy. Well, enjoy your unicorn while you can, because I'm guaranteeing you that it is going to change, right? And there are pockets right now. I have friends right now who are in some markets where door to door is not super strong there, and they're doing really, really well. And by the way, I'm not putting the water on door to door, but not by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm just simply making the point that there are markets where, like these micro markets, where they're kind of untapped, and I think they're getting fewer and fewer between. But the reality of it is that if you have that going on, enjoy it. It's kind of like Google Local Services, right? It's good until everyone jumps in, and then it's not so great. So, long explanation there, but that's my opinion.
No, listen, I think that backs up kind of what we're seeing within the sentiment from the groups. I think that leads in probably to the next trend in conversations that we're having a lot, Donnie, and that's around pricing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, interesting enough, within the groups, we've got some camps that, people are like, hey, listen, we've hammered our customers for years for pricing, especially for the last 2 or 3 years. We're really just not going to do anything. I am not in that camp. I am a complete fanboy of pricing and enjoying that leverage. And I've yet to see within our groups, or through just my past experience, and this is globally from my views with Anti-CMEX, where we've seen a pricing project that is thought out full, right? Jarl Dahlfors, who used to be our CEO at Anti-CMEX, Jarl used to always say, David, be brave, not stupid. All right. So there is, you can be stupid, right?
Right.
Did you get that backwards?
Stupid, not brave. Probably. The Florida boy would know. The Florida man would know Florida better than I.
Florida man, yeah.
On that. Yeah. But we're seeing incidents where people are still pushing through 10% price increases with virtually no pushback, like less than a 1% response rate. So from a trend standpoint, I still think that there is room for pricing. And I've said this, if you're a client of mine, or if you've known me for a number of years, you know what I'm going to say, but that is, hey, when it comes to pricing, typically speaking in our industry, we have a tendency to lick our finger, throw it up in the air and say, okay, I think we should do pricing this way. Right. And just, you basically pull it out of your keister. For me, it's just around testing. So if you're unsure what to do, test, get certain segments within the market, grab, a couple hundred customers and do a 4% increase, do a 6% increase, and do a 8% increase. And, if you do the 4 and 6 and it's crickets, and you do the 8 and you get 75 phone calls, the 8's probably not the good one to do it, right? Do 6. So, from a trend standpoint, pricing and utilizing that, lots of conversations around that. I do think that there is a bit more apprehension. Over the last 2 years, people understood that they needed to increase prices. Inflation was killing everybody. But the media is still talking about it. Inflation is still relatively sticky as it comes to service-related industries. So let the media continue to fuel that fire for us, because they're telling customers you should expect price increases or inflationary pressure with the service industry, and we're the service industry. Keep pushing pricing.
So there's one thing I want to add to that, because I'm probably straddling the fence on this one. And here's what I'll say. So at Triangle, since the whole inflation thing took off, we have done a net 30% price increase total. That's over a period of 2 years, right? We did a 10%, realized it wasn't enough. We did another 10%, went like 8 months, realized that wasn't enough. And then we did another 10% on top of that. And we did take some cancels because of that. Now, I'm not telling you that's what you should have done. That's what we did. If I had to do it over again, I would have done the same thing. I mean, because ultimately we had to keep
how's revenue? I mean, are you doing?
Yeah, revenue. We're on point.
More revenue for less work.
More for less.
More or less. That's exactly right. In fact, it was funny because I had a manager say, "Man, we've lost some customers, but we're on point with revenue." And I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly right." I'm like, at the end of the day, labor's hard to get, and I have to think about it as a business owner. I can only afford so much labor, so how do I leverage it? And it's going to be through price increases. So coming back to what I was saying before, I don't have the appetite this year to do an across the board price increase like I've done over the last probably 3 to 4 years. However, I am going to do price increases, but I'm going to do them differently. And I'm going to kind of revert to an old strategy that we used where we look at callbacks, we look at dollars per hour, and then we adjust the price increases based on that, where I'm really being very,
like to do.
Yeah, that way.
It's the PCO Bookkeepers model.
Right.
Exactly
Dan,
right.
don't you guys have a service for that, I believe?
We do. Thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, let me throw them a
through
bone.
your database.
PCO Bookkeepers,
There you go.
I think, has
Yeah,
something like this,
there you
right?
go.
We do that. We
Yeah.
do that. So,
But my point is like, I don't have an appetite for doing across the board.
But Donnie, why?
Mainly because we have actually we've gotten more pushback than usual with price increases with this, and we've seen more cancels than usual. Now, it was an aggressive we went very fast, and I mean, again, if I had to do it again all over again, I would do it all over again. But I want to really just kind of stabilize things a lot. And the other thing is like, I want to go back to this of where I'm like constantly just kind of, pruning the garden, right? I don't want to, for me, there are some customers that we already have what I would consider to be in the upper, I'd say 25 to 10% of pricing in our market. And I don't want to price them out quite yet. I've got some more low hanging fruit where folks are either, they've got callback issues, that they got whatever, that we could those are easy to do. So again, you don't have to agree with me, but that's what we're doing. So,
Well, the other thing is, if you keep doing across the board, everybody's got that customer that they make $500 an hour from because they're a great customer.
Right.
And you hardly have to do anything, and you keep increasing them, and sooner or later you're gonna they're gonna realize, whoa, this is a little. So I like to pick my acceptable dollar per hour and then bring it up to that number. However, that acceptable dollar per hour during inflationary times keeps increasing.
That's correct.
Why you got to do it. But the other thing which is interesting is in regular times, and I know that we're talking about the peer groups, and sometimes we do talk about this kind of thing. But if you remember our episode with Tony Massey, and he took apart a dollar and he said, a penny goes here and 5 pennies go here. And price increases in non-inflationary in time, that those pennies fall all to the bottom line because they're not, they're not taken up by the overhead. So price increases is a great way to increase your bottom line and your gross margins, right? So
I don't want to make this about price increases, but one more point to add to this, and then we need to move on to more trends, which is at the end of the day, if you are really struggling there's more than one way to get a price increase without raising prices. You can also look at your operations and get it in efficiency as well. And so that's always, I mean, I always like to say, are we as efficient as we can be internally first? And then if we are, then we'll pass along. But if you're still trying, I mean, again, it's just always worth looking at because technology changes, procedures change, products change. And so that's, we're constantly chasing that efficiency, as much as we can. And so that's also another area, I guess I'm making a point that you can get better pricing because Dan's right. In inflationary times, it does all drop to the bottom line. But if you don't raise prices and inflation's going up, that those pennies get smaller and smaller. So you got to really watch that. So, okay, David, you're about to bust. Go.
Well, that leads me perfect segue into other efficiencies, right? So within the groups, lots of talk around efficiency. All right. And when we talk efficiency in our business, that efficiency usually equals routing and density. So lots of conversations around routing, density. How do we increase gross profit? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to route more efficiently, right? So from there, though, that spills over into this whole KPI conversation, right? So how do you effectively track routing efficiency? And Donnie, I'd love to be able to get your feedback, and Dan as well. From my standpoint, back in my days with Anti-CMEX, we use tech utilization. All right. And basically, if you're taking this KPI around utilization, it basically takes the time that you've spent inside of your operating system, whether it's PestPack, field routes, or whatever. So time on site, timed into tickets, and then divide that into the number of hours you worked within your HRIS system. So if I paid you for 8 hours worth of work, you were logged into tickets for 6 hours in PestPack, then your utilization score would be 75%, right? So for us, from a benchmark, our benchmark was always 70%. We felt if somebody could be, in the 70% utilization space or higher, then we would start being able to achieve our gross margin goals of 60+% in gross margin. Yeah. But when you start tracking this, like whatever the number is, who cares? But it will give you an opportunity to actually be able to say, are we getting more efficient or not? Because a lot of times you can track probably dollars per hour or production, on accounts. But I've just found that tech utilization score is a really, really effective way to measure efficiency.
So I think that there's two things that go on there too for your gross margins, right? So if you increase your efficiency, but you're still if you're at 70%, but your gross margin is 48%, the problem is pricing, right? It's not efficiency. That's the problem. And so those two things kind of work in conjunction with each other, and you can see which one it is. You may have, you get $500 an hour, but if you have to drive an hour and a half each way to get there, that's not efficient. And that will bring down your gross margin, even though your pricing is really good.
Donnie?
Okay. Well, what you just said, like the hair went up on the back of my neck when you started talking, because we are way, way deep in the weeds in this right now at Triangle.
Yes.
And the reason is because I've had kind of this epiphany that I have stopped looking at dollars when it comes to efficiency. Now, obviously, I need to look at dollars to get my dollars per hour. But when I communicate back to my technicians, when I communicate to my managers, it has zero to do with dollars, nothing. It has everything to do with time and number of stops. And so all I look at now is unit stops. And, going back to what you just said, David, is looking at the number of hours that back in the day, it was like, okay, if you can get 200 stops in a month, that's good.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're in the slot. Now it's like, well, no, because I've got some guys who are going home at 1 o'clock, and I've got some guys who are going home at 6:30. Right.
Bingo.
Yeah. And it's just like, that's how you solve that problem. So going back to the way that we're doing it based on number of stops. And we obviously targeted, we targeted at 200. Now we're targeting 210. And the question becomes, what does that even mean, right? How many stops can we get into that? And so we are doing something similar where we look at the number of hours that someone's actually logged in. I'm sorry, that someone has clocked in versus how many hours they're actually on and doing work. And, we're just like any other company. We got some routes, especially here in Raleigh, they're super, super tight. Those guys are super efficient. And, their number might be 220, 230. Then I've got other folks that in different markets like Charlotte, where it's way more spread out, and their number's more like 190, 195. And so to me, I like 200. I like 210. I would love for it to be 230, but I'm not there yet. But that's how we're viewing it, and that's what we're driving towards. We have completely separated out dollars, because what I found is when we did it that way, it hid a lot. You know what I mean? Like they're like, oh yeah, their dollar per hours is fantastic. Well, it's because of pricing. Exactly what you said before, Dan. It's because the pricing is like so great. They can be totally.
But it could be more fantastic, right? So
Right.
it's
Exactly.
so the key here, right? Whether you're in the CSR or the tech utilization camp or Donnie's camp around number of stops, the whole key here for the listening audience is going to be, how are you going to measure it, right? Because we need a baseline that is consistent, right? And then the goal here is this continuous improvement of getting better.
Right.
And now you've actually know what success can look like. If you get your efficiency ratings down, then to Dan's point, right? If your gross margin sucks, well, chances are your pricing sucks.
Right.
All right. So, or your quality sucks and you're doing a bunch of free services. So you can do those efficiently, but they're still free, right? So you still have to look at the production numbers at some point in time. But Donnie, I'm 1,000%.
Yeah, if you separate them, you can tell where the problem is. Is it efficiency? Or is it
and by the way, it also identifies lots of different issues, right? So depending on how you do routing, we've got folks in our groups, and I've got clients that have specific CSRs that route, technician groups. And it's amazing how you see that some CSRs, when you start tracking this, some just don't route as effectively. So it's a training issue. So now you start having these identifying coaching moments because the KPIs are telling you they're there, or you've got two technicians that have the same type of routes, and one's at 70% utilization and the other's at 50. And that's because the guy that's at 50 likes to go clock in and sit at the park for, 2 hours a day on the company's dime, right? So, by having these proper KPIs in place, specifically around efficiency and routing, identifies these coaching moments. So now we can, as we become more professional organizations, we can coach people up or we can coach them out. It creates these other different layers. So,
all right. So we've been at this for almost a half hour. We have 14 questions. We got through number 1. Let's go to how do you see?
I still have other trends here. Hold on.
Yeah. We got to get
wait. I've got one more, Dan.
All right.
Yeah, we got to do one more. Let's do one more.
And probably the overarching trend that we're seeing is AI.
Oh.
Right. And I know that you guys have talked about this, so from AI, lots of conversations within the groups around how are we leveraging AI? You guys had an AI expert, that I actually was able to hear in Puerto Rico at the associated meeting. How are you utilizing AI? Guys, once again, and Dan and Donnie, you guys have done multiple episodes on this, whether it's Chat GPT or whatever it may be. There's some really interesting stuff coming through on just things I can't talk about, but God, when I can, it's going to be so exciting to come back on if you'll have me around AI. AI is certainly a hot topic in the groups.
So I will mention a couple of things that we've implemented in the last, I'd say 3 months at Triangle that have been really great so far. So I don't push products, but I don't mind sharing who we use and what we use. And at Triangle, we've been on CTM for a number of years. It's a product that we believe in. We formed a partnership with them, years ago when I was with Coalmarch, and it's a very sophisticated product. Again, it runs big call centers, but they launched an AI companion for customer service as well as sales coaching, and it has been fantastic because in the past, one of the things that we would do is we would screen calls. And the way we would screen calls, it's a pissed off customer would call in, and then we'd go back after the fact and be like, what happened on that call? And for this tool, we were able to identify quite a bit of training that could happen within the office because it listens to every single call and it reports on, the exceptions. And so what it did for our call center manager and, even our sales manager is that it highlighted and sent calls immediately. And here's the best part. It also pushes a summary onto the account in our operations software, which I think everyone knows what software I use. But that has been a game changer an absolute game changer. AI listening to every single call, grading every single call in terms of customer service, and grading every sales call, which has been amazing. Okay, that's been implementation number one. Implementation number two has been, and I talked about this on previous episodes, but we're getting ready to go mainstream with it, which is our own Triangle GPT, which is where, we're training it on our own procedures, and we're getting ready to launch it. We've launched it, kind of soft launched it to some folks in our office. We're getting ready to like actually make it totally official, where that's going to be part of our process. Is if someone's on a call and they need to know how to do something, or they want to get, they want to get an answer about something, they're not going to procedures. They're not looking through Drive. All they're going to do is talk to GPT, and it's going to pull back that procedure. So we've been training for that. It's not ready for launch, but it's coming. That's my next, that's kind of my next to do. And I imagine that's going to be done probably by midsummer. So
are you calling that Triangle GPT or WWDD? Like, what would Donnie do?
No.
No?
Florida man. No.
What would Donnie do?
WWDD.
No, but I mean,
write a book.
It absolutely
That's right.
is. I'm excited. I'm telling you guys, like, I think I did a small demo on our last podcast where I showed it, but it's just amazing. Like how much
have you seen, so we do these podcasts. Have you seen the Zoom AI after email that we get? I don't know if you've seen it, but Marisa uses it to do the show notes. It is spot on. It starts with our banter before we start recording. It goes through the entire thing, and it summarizes everything that we've said. It's so cool. It's Zoom AI.
I think is it off of, or Donnie, you use Fireflies. I've started to use Fireflies for my client calls. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you don't have some type of AI that is tracking and taking notes of the meetings that you have, and then from there, it'll give you a summary like Dan's saying, right. And then you can actually take those in. I learned this from Ed Robinson, who was the former now associated pest facilitator, but Ed is one of the top Vistage chairs in the country. Ed will actually take his notes, put it into Chat GPT, and ask it how he can more effectively coach his clients.
That's crazy.
It's insane. Yes. So, Dan, to get off of this, so final trend that we're really seeing in the groups, right? I mean, we're trying to stay focused here.
Yes.
And that is AI and what you're doing with it. If I know you guys have said this in the past, if you're not embracing this, you're going to get left behind.
You're going to get left behind.
So those are the four. Those are the four biggest ones.
All right.
All right. Now we can get off.
How do you see these groups evolving over time? I mean, we've been to a bunch of them. Donnie and I have been doing them for years. They're you go to them and you leave and you've got a million ideas, and it's really terrific. But, you've taken it to a new level for us. You're getting to see, what you do in your consulting business, and how do you see this thing moving forward?
Yeah. So, as we're about to launch fourth group here, my goal by the end of the year is to have 6 groups going. The groups are really interesting. They begin to kind of take on a life of their own, and the dynamics within the group. Yeah. So as I sit down and, as we've had inbound calls for these. So one, not everybody gets in the group. All right. Fit for me is really, really important. The reason and why you want to be part of the groups, really, really important. So I want to make sure that the people that we bring into the groups actually, fit some of the, criteria that I'm looking for around the why, right? So as we put these groups together, one thing that I've been very honest with everybody is, hey, at some point in time, I could see us recalibrating these groups. You're going to make, in the challenge with some of these groups, right? You see eye to eye with some people. You actually make some really good friendships with the groups. I mean, Dan and Donnie, the groups you guys have had, a lot of them have been together for years, right? So, and you create these friendships within the groups. But ultimately, for me, it's the whole iron sharpens iron philosophy, right? And I want to make sure that we have the right iron combined within the groups, all right, that continue to sharpen each other. So the way I see these over time evolving is probably once we're up to that 6, 8, I don't know, maybe 10 groups over the next few years. At some point in time, I would like to recalibrate those groups, right? Size matters. All right. We've talked about this a little bit. So size matters within the groups. Dan, you've said this 1,000 times to me, David, in these peer groups, everybody always wants to be the smallest company in the group.
Oh yeah.
All right. So at some point in time, I'd love to be able to have the opportunity to recalibrate them. Maybe some because of geography. Our lawn group, there's some specific geography within that group. We still want to try to stay within non-competing markets and all that, so we can really feel comfortable sharing openly. But I want to be able to take some of the dynamics that maybe don't fit perfectly within groups, recalibrate them, and position the groups where, once again, we are not a travel group. Okay. My idea of this is, hey, we're working. All right. This is a work group. This is a work trip. And the time that people spend away from their business, Donnie, you're laughing and smiling.
I'm laughing and smiling because it's not a vacation club, right? I mean, ultimately, if that's what you're looking for, that's probably not a good plan, right?
But by the way, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you know that, I mean, associated. It's
we go to some really nice places.
Awesome, right? Yeah. And then I noticed Paul Bellows doing a cruise, right? That's cool stuff, right?
Listen, if you want that is not us.
Right.
Okay. Right. I'm trying to find a few different hub cities where we can get decent accommodations. They're easy to get in and out of. So lots of direct flights. And listen, we come in usually the evening before, we get up, we work all day the next day. We go have a really nice dinner together. We get up the next day. We usually work about half a day. Everybody high fives and we out. Right. I would love to see more of that as we recalibrate. And the other part that I want to mention into this is at some point in time, I have gotten a lot of requests and inquiries around, hey, David, what about for larger businesses? So we probably average, I don't know, Dan, Donnie, but it seems like we're probably around a $2-ish million, maybe $3-ish million, within the groups for our kind of average size, which I think is great. But if there are some larger businesses out there, and we probably need 6 to 10 businesses of size, but if you're interested and you're a $5+ million business, please reach out, right? Because I've got some folks that are super interested in doing a larger group. So some folks can graduate into that, and there's nothing wrong. Dan, you said this 1,000 times. Bobby Jenkins, right? I don't know what Bobby's business looks like in the Austin area, but it's well over $100 million now. And Bobby loves to go sit in rooms with people that have $1 million businesses because you can always learn from that.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sticking my nose up to say, oh, these bigger businesses can't learn from smaller, because you absolutely can.
Yes. Hang on. That's a really important point, what you just said, because I'm sure folks that know me for a while, I have a bit of an ego. I know I do. And when I was younger, I would go to these peer groups and I'd be like, well, no one in here is bigger than Triangle, so I'm not getting anything out of it. And it was a big mistake. It's absolutely a big mistake. And I will tell you, as I've gotten older, I don't want to say wiser because that would be lying. But as I've gotten older, I've realized
first you have to be wise to get wise.
You have to be wise. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and that's impossible. But I will say I enjoy the smaller groups because they're a lot closer to the action. You know what I'm saying? Like they're in the weeds, and they're like, and these are smart folks, right? I mean, these are startups, and so they're very much. You don't get the high level perspective. You get the in the weeds view, and I learn a lot from them. And so it's not all about, of course, I want to be the smallest one, but that's not necessarily, I mean, what you really want to be in the middle of the pack.
One thing that's interesting is that you get guys who have been in business for a long time, right? Maybe second generation, maybe an older guy in first generation. And pest control is the kind of business that you can build and it gets done. I'm not saying that you don't have to keep oiling it, but it gets done, right? And so if you have a 30 or 40-year-old business that's doing $10 million, you don't have to be that creative. You have to provide good service. But these young guys who are coming up with all of these amazing marketing techniques, just door to door, the whole, the YouTube, the Instagram and the TikTok videos and whatnot. That's they're scrapping. They're going to be those next guys, but
right.
That's who you're learning from. The guy who's making $1 million or $1.5 million and who's very comfortable and doesn't want to screw anything up, he's probably not as innovative as that young guy who's
Yeah.
But Dan, what I would say is that we're probably having less inquiries from that category. That it's really interesting, right? Within the groups, we don't have any not successful companies within the groups, right? Really interesting from my client base. I have no failing companies that have engaged David to fix the business, right? It's the folks that want to be part of this is because they are innovators, they are growing fast, and the commonality is everybody is really interested in getting better. Now, what better means, bigger doesn't necessarily mean bigger, right? So better doesn't mean, hey, we want to make all this profit, but they want to grow their businesses and be better in some significant manner. That is 1,000% the common thread amongst everybody that I've talked to, from the inquiries and the inbounds that we've had in our current membership. That is the common theme, is everybody just wants to get better and improve their business, but nobody is failing. It's hard to get really failing.
It's hard to get failing people to pay you money. That's why.
Well, I mean, the reality of it is too, is like, it's hard to get around. I mean, let's be real too, right? Because it's hard to get in a room with that many folks who have that same perspective, right? Who have that same drive behind them. For me personally, I enjoy the peer groups because of that. Almost everyone that's sitting around the table, they all want to grow. Much like what you just talked about, David, these are folks who are trying to grow their business. These are folks who care. These are folks that are not. They're, generally speaking, I'm not saying all, they're not sitting back and coasting, right? Generally speaking, they are trying to get better and go further. And so it's just good to be around folks like that, or who are super smart, who have kind of the same personality as you do in that regard, that you all, I mean, because a lot of times, I mean, I've gotten a lot of good ideas coming out of groups, and they were not all my own. But anyway, so really, truly, they were not. So,
yes.
All right.
Humble yet accurate opinion.
Yes. We're getting ready to have to wind this down. So, Dan.
So let's get to question number 3. 14.
We do need to wind it down. So let's finish out our final thoughts here. So, Dan, what do you got?
Well, appreciate you coming, David, and appreciate what you're doing for our
that is significant wind down.
That is
listen, Donnie. I mean, that was like boom,
that was bam. No, I actually do have a couple things, and one is,
all right, we don't appreciate you coming.
No, it's not that. First of all, thank you for doing what you do with the peer groups. For our listeners, if you're not a part of a peer group, obviously we would love for you to be a part of our peer group, but if not, that's fine. Just make sure you're a part of a peer group, or at least you've got something like a sense of a board of directors or someone that's helping you make decisions. Because the reality of it is that, oftentimes it's hard to see what's happening when you're sitting in the seat. It's always great to have someone in the back seat looking at what you're doing. And that's a great, a peer group is a great way to do that. I also will say, David, thanks for taking time to do that. I mean, if you have not spent any time with David, obviously he's a sharp dude, has a lot of experience, and I think it's a benefit for those that are in a peer group, that you get to have someone who has a lot of experience in dealing with business issues across the board. And so I think that's also a good thing. With that,
hold on.
All right, Dan thought of something. Okay.
All right. So
you see the smoke coming?
Yeah,
from the Florida man's head.
That's right. That's right.
Peer groups meet twice a year, right?
Yes.
They have 2 Zoom meetings, or 1 Zoom meeting in between each meeting, right?
The newer ones, yes.
The newer ones,
yes.
And they use we're still using Basecamp, so it's kind of like a social media for the peer group, which is pretty neat, so that people bounce things off. So there's a lot of value in it. And the other thing is, remember, when you're the boss and you don't have a boss, you're accountable to no one if you don't want to be. When you join one of these peer groups, you're accountable to everyone. It's kind of like not doing your homework when you were in school if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and it gets you kind of jazzed to do all this stuff. So
and I try to drive that engagement. So I refer to Basecamp, Dan, as an engagement platform, right? And we really encourage the members to share within that and stay engaged. And one thing that I think I do fairly well is, if it's just gets a little quiet for a little while, I will certainly help stoke those flames a little bit and just say, hey, everybody, remember, hey, we're all in this together, so it's really neat to watch that engagement.
We've had some great feedback.
Yeah.
So much better feedback than when Donnie
I was going to say, he actually does a much better job of it than we were doing.
Listen, this is what I do, right? You guys are, these big swinging successful entrepreneurs,
Yes,
these
we're big
large
swingers.
businesses.
Oh my gosh.
Huge triangle,
much
Pole
better
March
at
founder,
much
PCO bookkeepers, M&A specialists, wealth advisors. I'm just a struggling entrepreneur, just trying to make ends meet.
Just trying to eke out a living.
That's right.
I am absolutely
living in a state with no taxes.
Trying to make ends meet here.
Well, folks, you managed to do it again. You spent another 40 minutes or plus in this case with Dan and I. Of course, we're grateful to have David here on the show with us. Just a reminder, all the resources and topics that we talked about today are available on the podcast website. Just go to pmpindustryinsider.com. Take a look under show notes. We'll put up David's contact info. If you are interested in joining a peer group or learning more about it, you can always reach out to him as well. And we ask that if you enjoy this podcast or any of our episodes, we always appreciate those 5-star reviews. And if you got complaints, comments, just general complaining in general, we ask that you pass that on to Dan. And with that, we'll sign off. We'll see you next time. Take care.
See ya.
See everybody. Thanks, guys.